Welcome to episode number 5 of the Retro Gaming Roundtable. And before we get started on today's topic, let me introduce the rest of the roundtable here. We've got Jason from the Kinda Cool YouTube channel. We got Mark from the Dad Racer YouTube channel. And we got Lyndon from the Old School Games and Stories channel. He's always packing heat, and I do have to say I admire that. So today's topic we're going to get into in just a minute, and it's going to be our first and most nostalgic game consoles. So, take a walk down memory lane with us. And what we would really like to hear is about your first and most nostalgic game consoles. Any of your memories, man, share them in the comments. We'd love to read them. And before we get started there, we're going to do a quick shout out to a YouTube channel that we've been watching and have been admiring for a while, and just kind of shine a light on another channel real quick. So mine, and I think some of you guys have watched this channel as well, The Game Room. It's an Australian channel. The guy is really good guy. He's been subscribed to my channel. I've been subscribed to his. He's got some very good content over there. We will put the links in the description to all of these channels that we're shouting out, as well as all of the members of the roundtable. So we'll provide those. But you can find DIY, do it yourself, DIY, yeah, arcade cab type of videos on the Game Room's YouTube channel. And that's not the only thing he has, but he does go into, and he goes through it step by step, shows you how to do everything. He has game room tours, he has game pickups, and then he has another thing that he's been doing, and it's voice actors in strange places. And it's some of the very cool thing. I see you shaking your head, Lyndon. It's very unique. And he talks about some of the voice actors that we may hear in some of the games we play, and you might not know, that they're an actor that you actually know. It's pretty cool. So check out the Game Room. Jason, did you have a shout out today?
Yeah, actually I do. And thanks for having me back on. It feels like it's been forever since we've done one of these.
I know,
it feels good to get back. So.
Yeah.
So my YouTube shout out this time around is for Wriggle, and that's Riggel. And so when I first built my retro game room, I was kind of all around trying to make games look good on a flat panel display, a modern television, using upscalers and things like that, frame meisters, OSSCs. And when I got done with that, I realized that I really wanted to go backwards. I wanted to go to CRTs again, right? So, heading down that rabbit hole ran me into Wriggle's channel. And Wriggle is like a CRT super fan, man. He must have like a whole garage full of consumer grade televisions, but he's also got some professional video monitors and some broadcast video monitors. And he just does all things CRT. He does comparisons of those. He shows you how to go into your consumer grade TV and adjust the geometry and the white balance. A lot of cool stuff that a lot of people are scared to touch, but he'll show you how to do it. He's also really good at filming CRTs, and he can show you some tips and tricks and techniques to do that really well. And that's an art form to its own self right there, right? So very interesting videos. But he doesn't just do CRTs. He's got some playthroughs. It's kind of like One More Quarter, which is another one of my ones that I've shouted out before, where he does some 1-credit clears and 1-credit completes of arcade games and things like that on a CRT, being filmed on a CRT. So really cool stuff. So go check out Wriggle and see what you think. One thing I will say, parental advisory, you can get a little, expletives can fly from time to time. So if you get the young kids in the room, you might want to watch your Wriggle videos later on after they're in bed. Just want to throw that out there because I know we've got kind of a PG audience, right? Yeah. But anyway, go check them out. Wriggle. That's my shout out.
Nice.
Awesome. Mark, did you have a shout out today?
I do. Today's shout out is going to be The Game Fiend. And I love the chill, mellow vibe of this guy's videos. Very passionate guy. Not even necessarily, to tell you the truth, stuff that I'm 100% into, but, like, for example, very passionate about Pokemon, for example, and he loves his handhelds. Nonetheless, I love all of his videos. He often does it with kind of like an interactive audience participation type of tone, where he'll be walking around his city and showing the sights, but he'll also be like talking to you and asking you questions about what you think about, a given situation or topic. Very good, very cool guy. Check him out, The Game Fiend.
I am going to check that out, man. That's cool. All right, Lyndon, did you have a shout out today?
I do. I want to give a shout out to Retro Ed UK, another friend from across the pond. I think a lot of us watch him. He does reviews on games and toys from the 80s. He talks about He-Man, Ninja Turtles, the Thundercats, Star Wars, does a lot on that, plus all the video games, does pickup videos, collection videos, gameplay videos. I think he calls it lazy retro afternoons or something. And then he also does his Let's Get Physical series, which shows games and action figures and toys complete in the box, the physical copy of it.
Cool.
And to me, it's really interesting because he's in the UK, it's a PAL region. A lot of the artwork looks different from what we had here. So I really like that and enjoy that. And I recommend that to my fellow gamers. So go check out Retro Ed UK.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been watching his channel for a while now. Yeah, great content. Really great shout outs, guys. Good job. All right, so today's topic is our first and our most nostalgic game consoles. Not necessarily in that order. So we're going to start off with Jason. And Jason, just kind of talk about what was your first game console that you had, and you know, give us some memories that you had with your first game console.
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to. So my first console or video game experience ever was the Atari VCS, which is the video computer system, also later known as the 2600. And I'll call it the 2600 going forward from here. But I'll take you back to 1979, right? So I was an only child, but my mom and dad moved around several times throughout the late 70s and all the way through the 90s. We always lived right next door to my aunt and uncle. And my uncle worked in the computer industry, which was kind of a novel concept at the time. 1979, I'm over at his house, you know, checking everything out. And I noticed that he had this, you know, on top of his wood grain CRT television, he had this wood grain looking box. It had some black plastic and it had 6 switches with it. And I was like, man, I love that. I was a real little kid, but I was really gravitating towards this controller with this cherry red, bright red button. I just wanted to push it, you know. You know, that age kids want to push buttons. I didn't know it did anything, but I was having a good time. He's like, well, if you like this, you're going to love this. He turns on the TV and I realized that that controller actually allows me to interact with that television with all these games. And my mind was blown, right? As a young kid, that was the start of a beautiful marriage with gaming right there in 1979 in his living room. And he had some of the older, you know, classic 2600 games like Outlaw and Combat and Target Fun, things like that. And I played all those. And I looked forward to going over to his house every time I could to play the Atari. But little did I know that in the Christmas time of 1980, and I didn't ask for it because I didn't know you could ask for anything this big. I was still a pretty young kid. I got my own 2600 Atari. In 5, 6, 7 years, I just did nothing but play that thing and soak up as many games as I could. And I played all the famously good games. You know, I had Berserk and, you know, Donkey Kong and Frogger and all those types of things. But I also had the infamous bad games as well. So I had the, you know, the notoriously known to be bad port of Pac-Man that came home, where everybody was really upset. Pac-Man fever was sweeping the nation, but everybody was upset that it wasn't a one-to-one to the arcade. But I was Atari for a while. I knew that wasn't going to be the case. I thought it was a pretty good game, but I remember it being a big deal at the time. I also had E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which was known to be a horrible game. And I got a funny story with that. I was at Revco, which is like a pharmacy or drugstore that was around the Texas area at the time. Before we got CVS and Walgreens and all that stuff. And I said, Mom, I don't want a candy bar this time. I want this. And it was E.T. the Extraterrestrial for the 2600. It was 99 cents. She's like, no, honey, I don't think you can get that because it's probably mismarked. I go, no, it's not. Look over there. And there was like 4 gigantic bins of 2600 games for like 99 cents, 50 cents. She's like, all right, go for it. So we did it. So, that was my experience with ET. And it was kind of one of those things where it was my realization too, that certain game developers were better than others, right? You know, that was something that stuck with me from then all the way to today. I remember I was a big Activision fan. And I remember thinking names like David Crane to Activision, like Pitfall 2 and River Raid and Kaboom and all these games. I was learning that was just as important as names like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were to like the movie industry at that time. So I kind of had that apples to apples things going on with that. And it's still true to this day, you know? And I remember one of my best experiences gaming ever was beating Raiders of the Lost Ark on the 2600. I don't know how I did that as a young kid because that was a cryptic game, but somehow I pulled it off. And you know, I'm still chasing that dragon to this day of trying to complete games and see them through to completion and see the ending of the story. And that all started with the Atari 2600, man. So I have that system to thank for it. So that was my first console gaming experience ever.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right, Mark from Dad Racer.
Well, very similar. It's actually the Atari 5200. This was my parents' system. I knew nothing about video games at the time. And would you believe it? Some of my earliest memories have to do with the Atari 5200. I mean, I could swear that I was playing this console while I was still in a diaper. I still believe that, seriously. And I made a little bit of a prop here because I vividly remember playing this like 1 foot away from the TV screen, and I was probably like 2 years old at the time. I remember the controller very vividly, this goofy controller, you know, with the red buttons on the side, and it's basically like looked like a telephone. But here's about how close I was playing it. Oh wait, that's the wrong one. Something like this. Okay, that's a Zenith right there. So maybe not period specific, but it's definitely model brand specific. It was a Zenith TV. I remember playing games like this: Missile Command, Defender, and I don't know what else to tell you the truth. I remember lots of Missile Command, lots of Defender, and that's about all I remember of it. But it sticks with me. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately. I've looked around their house to see if they have it. They don't. I've never been, I guess, driven enough to get one for myself, but maybe one of these days I'll come across one. So that's my earliest video game console memory.
Yeah. All right, Lyndon.
Well, I wish I could tell you this was my first system, but I'm older than that. So when I was growing up as a little kid, the only home gaming console that I knew of was the Atari 2600. My neighbor down the street had one. I didn't know anything about the Intellivision, ColecoVision, the 452 different Pong systems, the Magnavox. I knew nothing about that. 2600 is all I knew. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Then on Christmas, 1984, y'all remember how it was on Christmas, that age between about 5 and 10. Nothing beats the nostalgia of Christmas Day. First little sliver of sunlight that comes over the horizon, your eyes are like, boing, Santa Claus. So that's me, 1984. I've ripped the covers off. I'm in my Voltron pajamas with the feet in them. Y'all remember those? I run into the living room, and there under the Christmas tree sat the Tandy color computer 2. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was a computer because I had seen, we had one in our school in the library. So I knew what a computer was. And my mom loves to tell this story because she knows how passionate I am about video games and music. So you know how moms are, they're going to tell embarrassing stories like that about the things you like. She says they were asleep. All of a sudden, something crashed into the bed and was bouncing around. It was me, of course. And I'm going, Santa Claus brought me a computer. And they were like, whoa, what? All right. Surely he bought you some other toys. Go play with them. We'll get up in a little bit. We'll hook it up for you. So my mom says about 30 minutes later, she starts hearing the most obnoxious sounds that she's ever heard coming from my bedroom. Something she'd never heard before, didn't know what it was, and immediately got up and came in there. And I've already got it hooked up and figured out what to do with it. And the first game I ever had was Megabug. That's what Santa Claus brought me that morning. And if any of you out there watching this have ever seen this game and played it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The sound effects in this game are absolutely obnoxious. So it woke them up immediately. She comes in there, like I said, already got it hooked up, but it was really easy. You guys remember these? A little switch. I had a little 12-inch black and white TV with the knobs that you turn, no remote control. I don't think they existed in 1984 anyway. All you had to do was loosen up screws and slide that in there. Turn it on, there it was. So, man, I really have a lot of nostalgia for this thing. I really love this thing. And through the help of Dad Racer and his advice, just want to let you know, and our fans, John and Bethany Engel, I know they had one of these growing up. I have been able to record some videos with this with my iPad, and they'll be coming soon, probably not long after this airs.
Awesome. Very cool.
So this is my first video game system, the Tandy Color Computer 2, or the nickname, the Coco.
Is that the one, or is that something you had to repurchase?
Yes, yes. This is actually mine from when I was a kid. This is what Santa Claus brought me,
That's great.
1984, and it still works like a champ.
Man, you get bonus points for that, man.
Yeah, that's special.
Yeah.
I need to clean it, but this is my patina. I put this on here.
Yeah, I'd leave it.
Yeah,
that's
that's why I've
perfect.
never cleaned it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do remember those TV switches. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well,
I guess this would have been for the same as the TI-99 or the Commodore 64, kind of along the lines of that, kind of a hybrid system. But I only know about the gaming part. The specs and what all it'll do is.
well,
Unfortunately, us being retro gamers puts us in the path of that RF from time to time still to this day.
yeah.
Which is not
Played
fun.
my Atari Jaguar for like 3 days on RF until I got your cables there, Jason.
I wanted to save you from that, man. I wanted to save you from that.
Yeah. Well, so first game console I ever played was an Atari 2600. And it was my sister's and my brother-in-law's. And they let me play Space Invaders. First game I ever played at home, Space Invaders. Man, I loved it, man. I was so captivated, and I didn't care that the games only lasted, I don't know, 5 minutes, maybe, 6 minutes once you start getting good enough. Man, I over and over and over and played it until they told me basically I had to go home. So, so I always wanted one, but we could never afford it. And we did a lot of kind of moving around, kind of like Jason's family did, and moved around several different places. Well, one day we were out at my grandparents' farmhouse. We had taken that house over and we're living there. And when you heard the car come home down the driveway and it was my mom, you better get your shoes on and you better get out there and help with the groceries, right? So I hear the car coming home, my mom and my little sister. So I'm throwing my shoes on and my sister comes through the front door and she says, "Hey, Mom wants to know if you're down here." I said, "Yeah." So that's all she said. I took off. I opened the door, and right when I opened the door, I see my mom holding an Atari 2600 in her arm, and this is like a week before Christmas. And
Wow.
she was holding, there we go, Pac-Man. So my sister was supposed to tell me not to go outside. So I opened the door, and my mom's face and mine were about the same. It was like, and guess what I got early? Yeah, I talked her into it. That night I was playing Pac-Man on my Atari 2600. And I don't care what they say about the Pac-Man port. It was cool that night, man. It was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first game console, the Atari 2600. This is not it, unfortunately. And I'm trying to remember. I can't even remember if it was the Vader version that I have now, all black, or if it was wood grain. I can't remember those details on it, how many switches it had, or I know it wasn't the Junior. I know that, but yeah.
I remember mine was a light sixer, man. It was the Woody with the 6 switches. Yeah, so I remember it like it was yesterday sitting in front of me. I wish I still had it, but I don't.
And I remember, so when ET went down to 99 cents, that was probably right around the crash, right?
Yes, yeah.
And
sure.
my mom brought home game after game every time she would go to the store. And I'm thinking, that's great, and then I'd see the price, or like $1 or whatever,
Yeah.
they were
It's one of those
discounted. I
things that
didn't
really
care.
sticks with you as a kid, you know, because
Yeah.
those were such high ticket items, and all of a sudden
Yep.
they're showing up like a candy bar price, you know, like what in the
And they were
world?
awesome to us.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was
the ones who
awesome. We
didn't
just
have
knew
it.
it was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But man, and then you guys remember Atari 2600, you could actually play it on a black and white TV, and you had a switch for color or black and white. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, that's back in the day. All right, so that is our first game consoles. Now let's talk about our most nostalgic game consoles, and we'll start again with Jason from Kinda Cool.
All right. So you heard my first, the 2600. My most nostalgic was actually the Nintendo Entertainment System. And so I was born in the 70s, but I consider myself a kid of the 80s, right? My key formative years happened in the 80s. That was a good time to be around. I can't argue. Tons of good pop culture to consume. And video games were part of it. And the NES was riding high there, you know, for a little while. And so what can I say about the NES that hasn't already been said? I'll just kind of get into my story with it, right? So it didn't hit my part of the world. I know it had a limited release in like New York or LA or something in 85, but it didn't hit my part of the world until 86, right? And it kind of landed on my radar then. And I didn't get one right away. I was a little bit late to the party. I was watching cautiously because I'd seen some other console systems kind of come and go and not really be the replacement to Atari that we wanted. We wanted everybody to have the system again, and we wanted it to be kind of, you know, a community thing. And it just wasn't happening. There was pockets of people who had this and there and that type of thing. But anyway, I was watching cautiously optimistic, and I had a friend that actually had had it very early in '86, where it was just the black box games were available. And I remember going to his house and going, "Man, this Super Mario Brothers game is awesome, and it's blowing my mind. This Duck Hunt's pretty cool." But I was looking for like arcade ports and things like that, and I was a Kung Fu Master, you know, fan, and they had a Kung Fu port, which is pretty good. But I wasn't seeing all the latest and greatest. Like, I'm gonna hold off and wait for a little while. And it'd be in 1986, and my friends and I had just got through watching the movie Rad, and I knew I needed to get a freestyle bike. I was getting a GT Performer for Christmas that year, and that was already set in stone, right? But Christmas of '87 was wide open, right? So I was watching throughout the year, and sure enough, by '87, the NES had really matured. And we saw the silver box games like Kid Icarus and Metroid showing up. You had Legend of Zelda hitting the scene. It was looking good. And then when I heard, and you guys have probably heard me rant about how much I love SNK's Ikari Warriors. When I heard Ikari Warriors was coming home to that system, I was like, all right, that's it. That's the Christmas present of '87, right? And we were talking about, you know, Lyndon was talking about Christmas nostalgia. I have huge Christmas nostalgia for the year I got my NES for Christmas. And I think that's a driving force. It's always a driving force. If you had a good childhood, you had good Christmases, and you got a ton of nostalgia around that. So NES factors hard into that. But there's other things that mix in as well that I would say that were, you know, driving the nostalgia feels too as well. And one of those was like all the association with things that are long gone now. So if you look at like print magazines, Nintendo Power, and I think what was it, Nintendo Fun Club or whatever it was before that, I couldn't wait to get that in the mail, man. Like every other month, couldn't wait for that. And that's all but pretty much dead now, you know, but it makes me feel good knowing that I had a moment there where I was getting a paper magazine that I could comb through. And that was pretty important. And also video rental stores renting video games. That happened in, you know, during the time the NES came out. And I know probably a lot of people here on this panel and watching at home have a ton of nostalgia around going to the video rental store and getting like a B grade horror movie and a tier 1A NES game and just enjoying the heck out of them all weekend with your friends and a sleepover and those types of things. Ton of nostalgia around that. We don't rent games anymore, so that's gone, you know, so that's a thing of the past. And then another one was like arcade ports. You know, arcade experience was huge in the 80s. If you're an 80s kid, man, you were trying to get any way you could to play that at home. And we knew the Atari was long in the tooth. It was done for trying to do it, right? But the NES could do it to an extent. It wasn't perfect. Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it could do it better than the Atari, and it could give you some of those feels and flavors of the arcade at home. And that was a big deal. We don't chase that anymore either. But back in the day, that was a really big deal, you know. Last thing I think kind of was cool about from a nostalgia standpoint is there was no Sega kids to get in the way, man. Everybody was a Nintendo kid, so everybody had a Nintendo, right? I mean, you might have had this one kind of weird kid that had a Master System or something, but they didn't really get real until the Genesis, you know. They didn't really become a thing. So, you know, you were at school, you had your backpack with your school stuff. You had a Nintendo game in the back that you're going to let Johnny or Larry or whoever else you use, and you're going to swap it out, and you're going to trade games. And that's just the way it was. And that was cool, man. It was that whole community feel that you knew. You didn't have to ask. You knew somebody had an NES, and that was a cool feeling, you know. So I think that's really all that kind of, you know, captures the nostalgia around why I think the NES is my particular personal favorite for most nostalgic console video game experience of all time.
Yeah, it was the community part of things too. Telling somebody, hey, did you know you can get 30 guys on Contra? What? And they pass some codes around, or some dude had the Nintendo Power at home that showed, you know, where some secret room was, some secret item, whatever. And they'd be like, hey, you know, Yeah,
well,
that
and you
was
can always
cool,
catch
man.
the liars too. I like
Yeah.
you probably have stories like this, but I was like, man, I'd never beaten Castlevania back in the day, and I'm across the lunchroom with a guy, and he's saying he beat Castlevania. I said, what happens at the ending, man? I got to know. He goes, man, he saved the princess. I go, wait a minute, save the princess? What? So I didn't think that was right, but that was the type of stuff that you would see that probably wouldn't happen these days because the internet can diffuse that before it even gets
Yeah.
started. So
Exactly.
but anyway, good point, Joel. Good point.
Dad Racer, most
Boy.
nostalgic.
Jason, you hit the nail on the head in more ways than one. I echo like almost everything you said, so many parallels. And for me, is to tell you the truth, it's a toss up between the NES and the Super Nintendo. I mean, growing up, I had a lot more Nintendo games than Super Nintendo, but there's probably a couple reasons why, for me, the needle tips a little bit more towards the Super Nintendo as far as nostalgia goes. Really simple. For one, exactly what Jason said, the video rental store, Blockbuster Video, was such a huge part of my childhood. And every Friday we would go there, we'd rent a movie and we'd rent a video game. And 9 times out of 10, for me at least, that was a Super Nintendo game. So for me, it was more than just about the video games themselves. It was about all of the other things and events that went along with that period of time. I mean, the Super Nintendo became synonymous with Blockbuster Video and vice versa. So tons of nostalgia going to the rental store. And when I think of Blockbuster, I think of Super Nintendo and vice versa. Another thing, I feel like Nintendo really came a long way since the NES as far as co-op play. So a lot of my nostalgia is based upon playing games with a friend, much more so than NES games. I mean, Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, all kinds of games. We would go to each other's houses. So I have tons and tons of memories of playing lots of 2-player games with Super Nintendo, much more than the NES. And also, another thing that Jason just said, the arcade experience, even more so with the Super Nintendo. I mean, Street Fighter 2 was practically an arcade perfect port, I feel like, at the time. So a lot of things, for me at least, came together with the Super Nintendo. And that's got to be my most nostalgic console.
Good.
Yeah, great choice, man. Great choice.
Yeah. All right, Lyndon.
All right, man, I've been waiting to talk about this. So you guys have noticed probably that either me or Dad Racer is going to break the rules here on this thing. And I think it's my turn.
Right.
My most nostalgia, or my best nostalgia, my fondest memories of playing games is not from a home console.
There you go.
It's from the arcades. And you guys talk about that the search to find the home console port that lives up to the arcade. I didn't have to worry about that because I grew up with an arcade basically in my front yard.
That's awesome.
That may sound crazy, but now check this out. My grandparents decided in 1968 that they were going to open a campground. And that's what they did. My grandfather had a lot of land. That's what they wanted to do. They did it. They built it, owned it, and operated it. And to begin with, he put in a small pool with a deck around it, and it was just for campers. After several years, I think in 1976, he took that out and put in a really big in-ground pool with a huge concrete patio around it and built an arcade and opened it to the public. And he could not have timed that any better whatsoever. There could not have been any more perfect timing. Because to begin with now, it was just pool table, foosball, pinball, jukebox, I think it was a small room, 20 by 20. Well, then video games started happening. And the amusement company that they had to deal with, you provide the place, they would bring the games, you split the profit, and they would service them and keep them going. It's a pretty good deal. So as the video games started becoming more popular, they were starting to bring a couple and kind of squeezing them in there. And the people told my grandfather, said, hey, your place is bigger, we bring you more games and we make more money. So immediately he doubled the size of it.
Wow.
Put another room on it that was as big as the first, and now it's like 20 by 40. So they packed that full of arcade games. Now I was born in 78, January 78. So by the time I'm 3 or 4 years old, I know a little older now, about 83, 82, 83, I remember them doing this. Video games are exploding. This is the golden era. You can't put enough games in there. It's elbow to elbow, people coming in from the public to go swimming and play video games. He doubled it again. He doubled what was already there, the 2 rooms that were there, and built another section as big as those 2. So my earliest memories of playing video games, period, is dragging a chair up to stand in it so that I could see to play Space Invaders and Asteroids. Yeah. And Asteroids is hard. For a little kid about 5 years old, there's no joystick, there's 100 buttons, that thing is flying all over the place. Golly. But man, what a great childhood I had. Because when school was out, I just moved in with my grandmother. Because I lived right through the woods on land that adjoined the campground. It's like a half a mile bike ride through the woods, down the cornfield, by the old barn. I'm at the campground.
There you go.
And I got off the bus there every day from school because my parents got home later. I didn't want to go home. I'd better get off at this campground because I'd go home every day from school, throw my book bag at the office at the campground or my grandmother's house, depending on what time of year. And I'd go play arcade games right after school. Just go in there, she'd give me $1 worth of quarters. I'd go play games before I did anything as soon as I got home from school, before I did homework or anything. And boy, let me tell you what, when school let out, every single day, I was there from sun up, sundown. There was, just like I said earlier, just the game room would be packed elbow to elbow with people that were coming in from the public because we were the only public swimming pool that had an arcade beside it.
Yep.
And you really don't see that. You don't see that now. So in the 80s, we were the only other arcade in our county. The only other big size arcade was in the mall in town. It was Aladdin's Castle. So we got all the great games. I would talk about all of them, but we'll probably save that for another show.
But
But now later,
another show called Living the Dream, man.
Yeah.
now later in the 90s, they built a new bowling alley, a new skating rink, a new movie theater, and they all had bigger, nicer arcades. And they had, the public coming in every day. They had a bigger crowd for a longer period of time, and we sort of fell down the totem pole. So in the 90s, when the Mortal Kombat stuff started hitting, all the fighter games, we would get them, but we might be a season late. Like they would be in Aladdin's Castle one year, then the next season we would have Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter 2, Killer Instinct, and all that crazy stuff. But man, the games I got to play just right there in my front yard growing up as a kid, you just cannot imagine how cool that was. I would give anything to go back and do it all again. Oh my goodness. That choked me up.
That choked me up.
I remember having to pull up the stool and pull off the ashtrays off the games. I remember that when I was
Yes. Oh, let me tell you a story real quick. How I made money to play games. This was the 80s. Smoking wasn't bad for you yet. My grandmother paid me a penny a piece to pick up cigarette butts around the campground.
There you go.
I would scavenge the campground, and the campground was 150 acres, almost 100 sites now. It wasn't quite that big then. I think it was 50 to 60, but it's still pretty big. And the whole week I'd be scavenging the campground, picking up cigarettes, trading them in for quarters. And she got half of that back because she knew I was going to put every quarter into the game, and she got that fun back.
Smart.
Yeah.
But it taught me great work ethic. I owe a lot to my grandmother.
There you go.
I wish she was still with us. She passed away several years ago. But the campground is still open. And if you're wondering, the name of it is Holly Bluff Family Campground, right in the center of North Carolina. It's still open today, 54 years in business, and my uncle is.
There you
Wow.
go. That's
Awesome.
cool, man. Great stories. I'm pretty envious.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to pinch myself. Did that really happen?
No kidding, man.
Yeah, I was there. I remember I lived it. That was so much fun, man. Oh my goodness. It really was.
That's awesome. Well, my most nostalgic, sorry, this thing follows me everywhere. My most nostalgic console, Sorry. My most nostalgic. Give me a second. My most nostalgic console is the Super Nintendo. No, it's the Sega Genesis, man. And a lot of the reason that it is the most nostalgic console to me is the first console I bought myself. I got, I worked for the money, saved the money, bought it myself, and we were chasing the arcade back then. I didn't live anywhere near an arcade, man. Let me tell you, that was a big treat. So we were chasing the arcades. So going out of town, buying my Sega Genesis, and my wife had to drive home because I had to have that in my lap, and I was looking at it the entire way, man. I opened it up, pulled the instructions out, was looking at it, and looking at those pictures of Altered Beast on there, man, going, oh man, it's going to be awesome. And it was like an hour and a half, just pure torture till we got home and got to hook it up and play it, and seeing an arcade port that was that good. I mean, back then, that was a good arcade port. Big, huge sprites, co-op, like, what made the Super Nintendo so great, co-op play. That's huge in the Sega Genesis as well. And yeah, I had been watching, the commercials that just kind of started hitting, and they had this kid, in this dark room, and they'd go over and he's playing Altered Beast on this big screen, and I'm just like, oh man. So I got my money, I went up, I got my Sega Genesis, I took it home, and the rest is history, man. I can't part with it. It's been with me ever since, man. And it's really the only, that, and I've got my Jungle Green N64 that I ended up buying later on. I'd had an original N64, the black one, but sold it and then got my Jungle Green. So those are really the only two original consoles I think that I have left that I bought myself. So a lot of great games, of course. Altered Beast, Strider. And this was a big deal back then, man. Yeah, I won't pay money for a Madden game now. This one was great. This one was back when EA was EA. So sports games on the Sega Genesis was a huge deal. And they always, even when after the Super Nintendo came out, I'm sorry, but sports games were a little better on the Sega Genesis. They were a little faster, a little more fluid. The Super Nintendo had more colors, brighter colors, better palette, but the games played better on the Sega Genesis. So that is my most nostalgic game console of all time. So,
Awesome,
all right.
awesome.
So this has been a really cool walk down memory lane. So let's try this. Let's flip it a little bit. And here's the lightning round pop quiz. So, Jason from Kinda Cool.
Yeah.
Has there been a console that you have no nostalgia for, didn't play back in the day, that you've recently got or got later in life that you love, that you enjoy playing, but no nostalgia there?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I got a tie for that. That's going to go to the TurboGrafx 16 and the Sega Saturn. So, and I actually grapple with that decision sometimes of which one I think is the better between the two, because I had no nostalgia for either of them. I didn't play either of them. I had friends that kind of had one, but I didn't know no real experience. And then lo and behold, when I actually get a chance to explore the libraries, man, the Japanese library for the Saturn is so incredibly awesome with 2D fighters and all sorts of stuff. The 3D games aren't really there, but that's okay. That's not usually what I go back for, for that generation. And same thing with TurboGrafx. I feel like the TurboGrafx is kind of a blend of a Nintendo kind of meets a Genesis. It's kind of like somewhere between the two, but the games on them are just so much fun. I just find myself going back to both those systems so often for that very reason, and can't recommend them enough. But yeah, those are my two.
All right, Dad Racer, you got a console that you've recently collected or just got into later in life that have
got into later in life? First one that comes to mind that I really enjoy a ton is it's a handheld. It's the Game Boy Advance.
Cool.
So many super good games that I didn't get to experience a long time ago when it came out the Minish Cap. Lyndon, I know you love that one.
Great game.
Metroid Fusion, all of the, the ports, Link to the Past, and all the Final Fantasy advanced games, just kind of porting over from Super Nintendo. Really, really fun. All of the Super Mario World, Super Mario 3, they call them Super Mario Advance. Yeah, a lot of hours put into that. Not to mention, I guess it's kind of a tie. I also like the DS, and I play everything on a DS Lite, which allows me to play Game Boy Advance games and DS games. But I'll probably give the edge to Game Boy Advance here. Yeah, I really enjoy that a lot.
Awesome. Lyndon.
Well, I'm gonna have to say the Intellivision. No, I'm just picking. The one that I had collected and never played as a kid or teenager or anything, the Saturn. Man, the Saturn is awesome.
Yep.
I got lucky to get one before everything got so high on it. And man, I just love that system. And also the Genesis as well. I knew several people, had several friends that had them and played them a little bit back in the day, but I really only remember playing the Sonic games and Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
I don't remember hardly any of the other games. And I've gotten into that one as a collector and as an adult. Man, there's some good stuff on the Genesis too that I missed out on, didn't know nothing about. So that as a Nintendo kid, to go back to the Sega stuff and see what you miss, man, it's cool. I'm having a great time doing that. So
Awesome.
it'd have to be the two Segas.
I like that. I can't use the Saturn because I did have one, like right when they started cutting the prices in the US on the Sega Saturn. I was actually able to get one and really, really loved it. And I actually have the pack-in game still, Virtual Fighter and Daytona in the cardboards. So yeah, that's cool. So I can't say that, but the TurboGrafx 16 was never on my radar. Never played it. Didn't know anybody who owned one. And I've had it, I don't know how long now, maybe 2 years, maybe a year. And man, it's awesome. We missed out on a lot of really cool games. Unfortunately, that system wasn't marketed correctly. There's some downfalls to it, like out of the box, it's single player. I mean, you got to get it multi-tap to actually even play two-player on co-op, And so there's some things about it like that. But yeah, I didn't know what I was missing. Really, really great shooters, good platformers. Yeah, Blazing Lasers is amazing. Legendary Axe is awesome. Ninja Spirit I just picked up, great game. And that Ninja Spirit's real good arcade port. So they had some arcade ports there. Yeah. So that would be my console that have no nostalgia for. I guess fresh nostalgia, right, Jason?
Fresh nostalgia, yes, indeed.
Fresh nostalgia. So this has been a pretty good walk down memory lane. Make sure you guys, head over to Jason, the Kind of Cool YouTube channel if you haven't, and check out his content. He has a really great video on what was the Texas Game Fest that you covered?
Classic Game Fest.
Classic Game Fest. And it's a good video, very high quality video, and it's really cool, especially since a lot of us haven't been able to get out to anything like that lately, and that things are kind of starting to open up, so it's very good. Of course, check out Mark at Dad Racers YouTube channel. Always has some great content, and really starting to beef up his content, and come over to the dark side a little bit. There's a little bit of Sega stuff slipping in there. There you go, there, man.
Anybody want a Genesis?
Hey,
head over to Dad Racer's channel.
Head over to Dad, and watch his game room tour and guess how many games he has, because you can win that Sega Genesis.
We're doing a giveaway. Price is Right rules.
Yeah, and if you're watching this show, you know what Price is Right it was, and you know who Bob Barker was. And Lyndon, at Old School Games and Stories. Check his content out, man. He puts out some really quality videos. And you said, what do we got to look forward to? Some videos of the Tandy, the Coco?
Yes, they are coming. I've already got 4 made.
Wow.
There you go.
I'm always ahead of myself.
That's exciting.
Well, that's how to be. Yeah. So yeah, look forward to that. Head over to his channel, check it out. Yeah. Anything in closing? Anything you guys want to add to the show tonight before we sign off?
Let's not have such a large gap next time between shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear that.
It's summertime.
Yeah. What are you gonna do, right?
Everybody got busy.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we were gonna put out a show. Man, I don't know how many times we had to delay it a couple weeks because
Right.
I'm guilty. I'm guilty for one of them.
and I am guilty for the other one. So, well, honestly, my job's contributed to that. So I'm planning on quitting my. No, I'm not gonna quit.
You just need a few more subscribers, man. That's all.
That's yeah, just a couple mil. All right. Well, I hope you guys really enjoyed this. So glad you took the time out of your day to join us and listen to us. And please put in the comments, man. We want to hear your memories. We want to hear your stories. That's good stuff, man. It's what this whole thing's all about. So thank you guys for joining me tonight. Thank you, Roundtable. Appreciate your guys' input on the channel. It's been amazing. So
Thank you.
all right.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, guys.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And I want to thank you guys for watching and have a great and safe rest of your day.